This is not a drill. This is a divine emergency. Chosen ones. I don't care who you are or how spiritually seasoned you think you are. If you treat this Sunday like any other day, you may forfeit the very breakthrough heaven has spent years preparing for you. While the rest of the world sleepwalks through their morning rituals, scrolling through distractions, sipping coffee, stuck in autopilot, the marked, the set apart, the spiritually sensitive are being ushered into a sacred corridor, one that only opens once in a great while, and only for those who are awake enough to notice the shift in the air, the silence that hums with electricity, and the seconds that suddenly feel stretched by eternity. Make no mistake, this isn't just another date on the calendar. This is a spiritual gate. And if you speak to the wrong person, or even the right person at the wrong moment, you risk contaminating the frequency, not because they're evil, not because they mean harm, but because when the atmosphere is charged, every word carries the weight of manifestation, and not every voice is meant to mix with your miracle. This is why I'm pleading with you, warning you, shaking you. Awake in the spirit. Stay silent. Protect your channel. Guard your gate. If this is already resonating, if your spirit is trembling with recognition, drop 777-inch the comments right now. That's not superstition, that's alignment. And to every soul who supported this channel through super thanks. Thank you deeply. You're not just helping a video, you're helping deliver prophetic clarity to someone on the brink of breakthrough. Because what I'm about to show you next, it's the reason why the enemy has been trying to distract you all week. It's the reason your sleep has been strange, your energy has been shifting, and your discernment has been on high alert. This isn't random. This is a revelation. Keep watching before the window closes. God's chosen ones. Do this on Sunday, or risk losing everything God is sending your way. There are days when heaven leans in quietly, and then there are days when it roars. This Sunday is no ordinary day. It's a divine trigger point. While the world sleeps through its routines, you are standing on a spiritual fault line, about to rupture with power. A sacred alignment is forming, and with it, your every word will echo like thunder through eternity. During this window, your mouth becomes a weapon or a womb. Words won't just be heard, they'll manifest, multiply, materialize. Just like God's command, let there be light, Genesis 1-3. You are about to speak into your atmosphere, and it will OBY. Here's what most people miss. This Sunday, the spiritual veil thins to almost nothing. The air becomes electrically charged. The realm of the unseen presses into the scene. What comes out of your mouth will either build your destiny or destroy your design. What if your next sentence is either a divine unlock or a detonator? Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Proverbs 18:21 isn't just a metaphor, it's spiritual law. And this Sunday, that law is on steroids. The energy field around you becomes magnetic. One sentence, positive or poisonous, can rewrite the trajectory of your calling. Have you noticed it already? Time bending, numbers repeating, coincidences stacking up like code. You've been sensing something beyond logic, haven't you? You're not crazy. You're calibrated. The divine is pulling you into a corridor where every syllable matters. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10 isn't soft advice. It's a divine command to keep your gates sealed. Why? Because your silence is not silence. It is a spiritual strategy. It is divine insulation. Words are entry points. Spirits hitchhike on syllables. And this Sunday, even a harmless chat can hijack your frequency. What enters your gates now can echo for years. Let's look at Malala Yousafzai, Nobel Peace Prize winner and survivor of targeted violence. Her quote, "When the whole world is silent, even one voice becomes powerful," wasn't poetic, it was prophetic. She didn't need noise to shake nations. Her silence became a furnace. Her voice, when it finally rose, became a trumpet of justice. This Sunday, your silence could be your most violent act of spiritual warfare. But now look at the flip side. Anna Sorokin, A.K.A. Anna Delvey, rose as a fraudulent icon of luxury. She used charm, illusion, and persuasive lies to infiltrate the elite. Her weapon, words. Her reward, handcuffs, scandal, deportation. Her false narrative became her own cage. That's the price when words become spells of self-sabotage. This Sunday, don't curse what you've been praying for. Jesus warned us plainly, by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Matthew 12:37. Heaven doesn't forget. Every syllable is a seed. Every phrase is a future. Now answer this. What if one careless joke cost you your calling? What if a sarcastic reply poisoned your promotion? What if letting someone vent in your space infected your vision? Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. 1 Corinthians 15:33. This isn't just about avoiding toxic people. It's about shielding your purpose from polluted frequencies. You are not being sensitive. You are being summoned. Spiritual giants like Charles Spurgeon understood this level of clarity. He once said, "Discernment is not knowing the difference between right and wrong. It is knowing the difference between right and almost right." And almost right is the serpent in the garden this Sunday. What do? Clamp your mouth. Secure your soul. Speak only when commanded by heaven. You don't need to respond. You don't need to defend. Your silence will roar louder than any argument. As it's written, a time to keep silent and a time to speak. Ecclesiastes 3:7. This isn't a time to prove yourself. This is a time to preserve your divine alignment. The enemy? He's lurking in conversations, hiding in gossip, hoping you'll react, snap, overshare, or second guess. But this time, you won't. You know better. You've been trained for this moment. God's chosen ones. Wake up to the urgency. This isn't a drill. It's not symbolic. It's supernatural. If you mishandle this moment, you risk aborting what was meant to be born through you. But if you master your mouth, heaven will move on your behalf. So rise, guard your gates, silence your surroundings. Speak only what heaven would shout. Say only what God would sign. And when in doubt, seal your lips and strengthen your spirit. You are not just surviving this Sunday, you are scripting it. And if you do this right, you will never be the same. This Sunday is not just a date on your calendar, it's a cosmic checkpoint. A sacred turning of the gears in the machinery of heaven. You are not just passing through time, time is passing through you. On this day, a holy intersection forms where the past, present, and the potential futures of your life converge in one narrow corridor of spiritual clarity. And you, the chosen one, will stand at its very center. The emotional frequency of the planet is shifting. The moon enters Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, the giant of truth, expansion, and divine direction. In astrology, The moon governs emotion, what we feel, absorb, and project. Sagittarius, it doesn't tiptoe, it fires. Words spoken under this sky aren't suggestions, they're arrows. They cut through the fog and create new paths before you even realize they've been lost. Set a guard over my mouth. Lord, keep watch over the door of my lips. Psalm Ma'arba'im Ve'chachlosh. That prayer was never more relevant than now. This Sunday. Words will carry weight. Light ones will lift you. Heavy ones may bury you. The moon doesn't just reflect sunlight, it mirrors emotional truth. Sagittarius aims for expansion, but it can also expand wounds, assumptions, or careless commentary. Most people won't realize how volatile the spiritual atmosphere has become. They'll laugh too loud, speak too quickly, and ignore the ripple effect of their words. But for you, one overheard sentence could shift your perception for weeks. Have you felt it already? Like something's building behind the curtain of your life? That isn't random. You're hearing something others aren't, because this Sunday isn't about noise. It's about signals, about filtering out distortion and tuning into something higher. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46, Asel. Stillness is not passivity, it's preparation. The prophets of old didn't vanish into silence to escape people. They did it to protect the clarity of divine download. They knew that sacred instructions can only land in sacred space. To anchor this truth, let nature reveal it, the Nautilus shell, a marine wonder of divine mathematics, forms a near-perfect logarithmic spiral. It grows silently, hidden beneath layers of ocean weight, expanding its chambers in precise order, not rushed, not reactive, structured by design. That's what your spirit must become this Sunday, an inner sanctuary of order, stillness, and deliberate expansion. Let others move in chaos. You expand in sacred silence. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. Habakkuk 2:20. That's not a poetic suggestion, it's a spiritual instruction for days like this. What if this Sunday is not just a portal, but a filter? What if what you allow in through your ears will anchor your next decision, your next delay, or your next deliverance? And yet, few will recognize it. They'll continue speaking out of habit, engaging in casual chatter, unaware that every syllable is echoing in the spirit. But you've been warned, and that's a mercy. In the European Christian-themed film Le Huitième Jour, The Eighth Day, a poignant line breaks through the noise. You see only with your eyes, but to really live, you must listen with your soul. This Sunday, that quote is not art, it is your assignment. Call me and I will answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know. Jeremiah 33:3. But how will you hear the unsearchable if you've allowed your atmosphere to be saturated with static? Jesus reminded us of the power of restraint. By your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Matthew 12:30. That verse should sober you, because even a harmless joke or a conversation with the wrong person can pull you out of alignment if your frequency isn't guarded. So guard it. In repentance and rest is your salvation. In quietness and trust is your strength. Isaiah 30:15. This is not the day to explain, defend, or convince. It is the day to retreat, not in fear, but in reverence. Remember this: heaven rarely raises its voice. It moves in patterns, in waves, in whispers that only silence can interpret. And if you're speaking, you're not listening. You've been brought here for a reason, because this moment is more than a coincidence. It's a spiritual hinge point, a portal disguised as a pause. Now listen deeper. A sentence is not just a sentence today, it's a seed carrying velocity. Under normal emotional weather, most words fall to the ground and dissolve, but with the moon in Sagittarius, carried by the breath of Jupiter, even casual words take root in the most open, fertile field. They can find your thoughts, your energy, your subconscious. In quantum physics, we know that the observer effect changes the outcome of an event. What is witnessed is changed simply because it is being perceived. In the same way, this Sunday carries the potential for your inner world to be altered by external vibrations. Every conversation is a collision, every word a waveform. What if your entire emotional field is being rewired, not by what you believe, but by what someone else said at lunch? Set a guard over my mouth. Lord, keep watch over the door of my lips. Psalm 40:3. That scripture isn't about moral control, it's about spiritual security. You see, most people won't mean harm, but they are projecting their inner weather, fragments of trauma, half-buried fears, loops of narratives they haven't yet resolved. And under this charged sky, your boundaries become porous. Words don't just enter, they embed. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Proverbs 4:23. Today, the heart must act like a firewall, discerning, filtering, refusing entry to what doesn't serve your spirit. And this is where spiritual sovereignty matters most. Because when you don't realize your own gates are open, you begin to grow crops you never planted. A doubt here, a delay there, a misstep born not from disobedience, but from contamination. To deepen this, let's look at a voice not often cited in spiritual circles. Dr. Edith Eger, Holocaust survivor, psychologist, and author of The Choice, said this: if you don't learn to control your internal world, you'll live as a prisoner in a reality created by someone else. Her insight reveals a truth many overlook. You can be spiritually gifted and still emotionally hijacked if you don't recognize the source of the signal entering your spirit. This Sunday is not about superstition. It's about energetic design. Think of it as a cathedral under construction. You would not allow construction workers to hammer randomly or visitors to etch graffiti into the walls while sacred measurements are still being laid. This is not the time to be casual with your interior. You are in what physicists call a threshold state. Not quite one thing, not yet another. Between movement and stillness, between becoming and arriving, and in that suspended state, any foreign input can cause a chain reaction. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 40:10. Stillness is not stagnation, it is stabilization. It's the spiritual equivalent of concrete curing beneath the surface. Move too soon, and the whole structure weakens. Let it settle, and it becomes unshakable. And what if silence isn't emptiness but the sacred space where God finishes the last detail in the blueprint of your next elevation? Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. Mark 4:9. But not every voice should be heard. Not every signal should be received. Today, the veil is almost transparent. The filter between your soul and the world's noise is thin. If you don't hold your ground, someone else's emotional broadcast will hijack your signal. You'll catch yourself thinking their thoughts. You'll feel a wave of anxiety, but it won't be yours. You'll carry their tension in your chest, echo their doubts in your head, replay their fears on repeat as if they were your own. But here's the truth. You're not weak. You're attuned. You're sensitive because you're chosen. Sensitivity isn't your flaw, it's your sword. But a sword untrained can still wound its bearer. That's why discretion must accompany sensitivity. Or else your atmosphere will become a dumping ground for frequencies you were never meant to absorb. And if your atmosphere is constantly absorbing what's foreign, how will you ever recognize what is authentically yours? My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. John 20:7. This verse doesn't just speak of hearing, it speaks of recognizing the right voice amid the static. That's what silence does. It sharpens recognition. We often misunderstand silence. We think it's emptiness. But in truth, silence is presence without leakage. It's containment, power with its hand on the trigger, not the bullet sprayed in every direction. When you don't speak, you're not withdrawing, you're observing. You're letting the spiritual air clear so your inner barometer can detect what pressure is yours and what's been projected onto you. And in that stillness, the illusions scatter. Have you ever noticed that when you choose to speak less, people begin to reveal themselves more? Silence triggers exposure. It's like turning the volume down on the world and watching who still tries to scream their way into your peace. The prudent keep their knowledge to themselves, but a fool's heart blurts out folly. Proverbs 12:23. A storm doesn't need to tell you it's coming. It arrives. So does a spirit out of alignment. But you, chosen one, are being trained not to react, but to read, not to absorb, but to discern. Because when you refrain from speaking, you also refrain from attaching, and when you no longer attach to someone else's story, you finally see what stories keep arriving, uninvited at your door. That's when the patterns surface. The person who always calls right before you're about to move forward will call. The friend who floods every moment with urgency will rise in pitch again. The relative who turns every room into a shrine of worry will lace the air with anxious incense once more. But this time, you won't breathe it in. This time, you won't reach for the brush. You'll let their paint dry on its own wall without becoming your canvas. Do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? 2 Corinthians 6:14. That doesn't just apply to romance. It applies to frequencies, alignments, dialogues. Even in the modern world, we see echoes of this wisdom. Take, for instance, Rick Warren, pastor and author of The Purpose-Driven Life, who once shared, "You cannot fulfill God's purpose for your life while focusing on someone else's expectations." It's simple, but powerful. If you keep absorbing other people's pressure, you'll build a house based on their blueprints and wonder why it never feels like home. And yet, there's a cautionary tale too, one less often told. Billy McFarland, founder of the infamous Fyre Festival, was once a rising star in the business world, with charisma, connections, and confidence. He convinced thousands to buy into a luxury music event that never existed. But behind the curtain was pressure, external voices, internal fear, relentless hype. Instead of recalibrating in silence, he doubled down on illusion. And when the curtain fell, it crushed everyone underneath it. Today, his name is synonymous with deception. His legacy collapsed under the weight of unreality. The consequence of listening to the wrong voices and amplifying them can echo for years. Now pause. Breathe. Has someone else's fear become the paint on your internal wall? Is the pressure you feel even yours? Or is it just an echo that slipped in while you weren't guarding the gates? Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. James Echet, Tisha Esa. Scripture doesn't teach silence as weakness, it teaches it as wisdom. God's chosen ones, this is your commandment for the day. Do not color yourself with borrowed emotions. Let the brush fall. Let the paint dry. But do not wear it. You are not obligated to inherit fear just because it showed up in a familiar voice. Today, silence is not retreat. It is revelation. It is the mirror. It is the line drawn in the sand. Step back. Breathe deeply. Hold your peace, not as absence, but as presence without compromise. Let the world reveal itself, and let your discernment, not your reaction, write the next sentence of your story. This restraint you're feeling, this pull towards silence, is not a punishment. It is precision. You are being entrusted with a spiritual tool that only functions when the world's volume is turned down. And Sunday is your calibration day. Imagine a glass of water, clear and still, until a spoon stirs, the sand settled at the bottom. Within seconds, the clarity is gone. The once transparent liquid turns murky, but if you let it sit, the sand settles. Stillness reveals what striving hides. In quietness and confidence shall be your strength. Isaiah 30:15. That's not poetic fluff. That's divine physics. Clarity doesn't come through motion. It comes through mercy, through the sacred pause. This is the gift Sunday offers, not an argument, not persuasion, not eloquence or defense, but clarity without friction, peace without performance. You may feel the pull to explain yourself, maybe to reassure someone that your silence isn't distant, maybe to defend the soft walls of your boundary by wrapping them in sugar-coated apologies. But you must resist the embroidery. Clean lines are kinder than ornate justifications. A simple, "I'll talk tomorrow," realigns your center far better than a paragraph of emotional detours. Let your yes be yes, and your no, no. Anything more comes from the evil one. Matthew 5:37. Jesus wasn't being harsh. He was teaching us energetic hygiene. When your language is clean, your spirit stays clear. Have you ever noticed what happens when you say less? The jaw unclenches, breath deepens, the body warms from the inside out. Like the sun breaking through after a long night, your system recognizes truth before your mind can label it. Your physiology doesn't lie. It always knows when you're aligned. And perhaps that's why the ancients across cultures marked specific days for silence. It wasn't superstition. It was a sacred rhythm. It was spiritual filtration. Not every door should open every day. Not every chamber of your heart needs to be toured all at once. Under the influence of a Sagittarius moon, the palace of ideas expands wildly. Thoughts race. Opinions fire like arrows. Options present themselves like endless hallways. But spiritual maturity says, choose one hall to walk in today. And if not one, then none. That's not passivity. That's mastery. Think of the cicada, a creature that spends years beneath the earth in total silence. It waits, patient, undetected. And when the right season comes, not a moment before it emerges in full song, no noisy song, that is you today. Don't speak before the music is mature, but you will be tested. And here's what most people miss. Tests don't arrive with warning signs. They don't knock with a sinister grin. They come dressed as comfort, as warmth, as love. A quick phone call, a soft voice, a harmless text, a request for your opinion about a storm that was never yours. Even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. 2 Corinthians 11:14. That's not meant to scare you. It's meant to sharpen you. Because discernment isn't about spotting darkness, it's about identifying disguised disturbance. Those friendly interruptions often land precisely at the moment you decide to enter stillness. A message chimes the second you close your eyes. A voice calls just as you exhale. These things don't happen randomly. Distraction has perfect timing too. Do not give what is holy to dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine. Matthew Sheba. Not everyone deserves access to your voice, your energy, your stillness. And in moments like this, art sometimes says what theology can't. In the 1995 Belgian spiritual drama Diane's, a priest fights for the rights of factory workers despite corruption from both church and state. In un pivotal moment, he whispers, "It is not always the devil that silences you. Sometimes it is God, shielding your voice until the world is ready to hear it." That line is your prophecy today. Your silence is not suppression, it's divine protection. Heaven is shielding your frequency from distortion. What sacred thing might be growing inside you? Too fragile right now for exposure. And what if breaking your silence prematurely is like pulling a rosebud apart to check its progress? There are moments when even love, as sacred as it is, must be contained, because love without boundaries doesn't bless. It overwhelms, it becomes a flood, and while water gives life, a flood erodes the very ground it touches. You, chosen one, were never called to be a shoreline slowly dissolved by other people's tides. You were called to be a sanctuary, a space set apart, designed by divine architecture and reinforced with holy stillness. And what you're being asked to guard today is not just your time, but your atmosphere, your frequency, your emotional bandwidth, your spiritual resonance. He who has no rule over his own spirit is like a city broken down, without walls. Proverbs 25:28. Boundaries are not emotional walls that block love. They are structural reinforcements that preserve purpose and keep divine timing intact. This Sunday is quiet on the outside, but spiritually alert. You will be tested, not by enemies, but by the familiar. The first test is subtle, yet insistent. Urgency. Someone will press that now is the only time to talk. They may sound caring, even desperate, but urgency isn't always sacred. In psychological terms, this is emotional, flooding a state where one person's unprocessed intensity tries to override another's inner rhythm in search of immediate relief. But that search has a cost, and you are not a host for their emotional overflow. You are a sanctuary, and sanctuaries do not sprint. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understand slowness. Instead, he is patient. 2 Peter 3-9. The pace of heaven is deliberate, and your soul must match its cadence. How many times have you said yes too quickly, only to regret it silently later? How often have you matched someone else's chaos, thinking it was compassion? The second test will sound like affirmation, flattery. Someone may say, "You always know what to say," or "No one understands me like you." That may be true. You do hold rare emotional intelligence. You do carry profound insight. But wisdom delivered out of timing becomes interference. And when your spiritual channel is still open to receive for you, offering advice for someone else diverts the stream intended for your next step. In systems theory, every signal must be processed in sequence, interrupting the order that corrupts the output. Likewise, if you give what you've received before you've fully received it, you fracture the message before it completes its work for you. There is a time to be silent and a time to speak, Ecclesiastes 3:7. And speaking in the silent hour, even with good intentions, can block your next divine instruction. Have you considered that your words might be holy fuel, meant only for the altar of your own breakthrough? And what if speaking too soon is the reason the fire hasn't fallen yet? Then comes the third test: provocation. Not through argument, but through subtle jabs, old stories, carefully dropped phrases designed to poke your soft spots. These aren't always malicious, but neurologically, this is trauma pattern reactivation, a psychological loop that pulls you backward when you're on the verge of breakthrough. If you take the bait, you'll spend the next few hours reorganizing emotional furniture in a house you no longer live in. But if you let the bait float by, if you let the comment land but not penetrate something shifts, the silence that follows will feel unfamiliar but exhilarating, like entering a room you've never stepped into before. Light, filled, breathable, clean. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Romans 12:21. Sometimes the good is simply not reacting, not stepping into a trap disguised as familiarity. The complexity of these tests is that they always come through relationships. Strangers don't know where your levers are, but those close to you, they do. And not because they're manipulative. They know which emotional buttons to press because they've walked your story with you. Intimacy stocks the shelves with those buttons. But today, you chose not to be pushed, even sweetly, even softly. Your no is not against them. It is in service to the divine instruction still on its way to you. Will you honor the construction of your inner sanctuary, even if others don't see it yet? Or will you allow old access points to undo what silence was sent to secure? There may be fear. What if they misread my silence? What if they feel abandoned? But if the connection is real, it will survive the quiet. As Henri Nouwen once said, when we are securely rooted in personal intimacy with the source of life, it will be possible to remain flexible without being relativistic, convinced without being rigid, willing to confront without being offensive, gentle and forgiving without being soft. And the kind of love that demands constant access isn't love, it's appetite. And even sacred appetites can wait until Monday. Hold steady through the small storms. Don't flinch when the phone buzzes in the other room. Don't rush to respond to the tap, tap, tap of someone else's urgency. Just pause. Step outside if you can, and feel the subtle thickness in the atmosphere. There's something different in the air on days like this. It's not pressure, it's presence. The kind of stillness that doesn't shout, but you can feel it humming under your skin. The animal kingdom seems to sense it. The birds go quiet for a moment, just long enough to recalibrate their orientation. A dog, normally reactive, holds back its bark like it's waiting for a permission only it can hear. The cat, it's tracking something invisible across the wall, following a line we'll never see. Nature knows, on certain days, it's not about doing, it's about sensing, about reading the unseen signals. Be still before the Lord, and wait patiently for him. Psalm 30, Sheba. That verse isn't passive, it's deeply active in the spiritual realm. Stillness is a discipline, a way of staying in alignment while the rest of the world spins out of place. And if you stay the course, if you resist the impulse to prove, perform, or pacify, you'll notice something by nightfall. The tests that felt urgent in the morning, they begin to lose their grip. The calls stop ringing. The questions no longer press. The hooks are still dangling, but they've lost their bait. You have passed. Not by confronting anyone, not by issuing speeches or drawing boundaries in bold red. You passed by, not abandoning your post. You stayed at your station. And there, right there in that quiet obedience, something shifts. A light begins to glow. Not a spotlight, not a theatrical floodlight, but a quiet radiance that seems to rise from within you, like a pilot light that's been burning all along, now fanned into steady heat. You may not even notice at first. It's subtle. Your mind just feels clearer. Your body feels lighter. That knot in your chest, gone. That tension in your jaw, released. And those conversations you consciously avoided earlier, they no longer buzz in the corners of your mind, demanding attention. Why? Because silence, when honored fully, begins to function like a spiritual shield. It doesn't require your vigilance to keep it active. It just begins to work in the background, keeping your soul insulated from unnecessary energy leaks. This is the reward of stillness, consolidation. All the mental fragments that could have been hijacked by scattered conversations or emotional downloads from others have now returned to you. You're back in your own center. The unfolding of your words gives light. It gives understanding to the simple Psalm 110 ma vesheloshim. But what if the words aren't unfolding yet because your inner world is too crowded? What if the clarity you crave isn't coming from answers, but from refusing distraction? That's what you did today. You didn't scatter. You stayed. You're no longer rehearsing conversations that never happened. You're no longer running emotional simulations of other people's storms. You're not calculating how your tone sounded, or whether you should have said more or less. You're simply here, present, still, unentangled. And this is the space where spiritual power builds, not in dramatic acts of force, but in the quiet reclamation of your attention. To illustrate this, consider Krista Tippett, the award-winning broadcaster and founder of On Being, who once said, "The soul doesn't come to life in noise. It comes alive in the presence of what is real and undemanding." Oh, she wasn't speaking to monks or mystics. She was speaking to people like you, those called to hold space for meaning in a world addicted to noise. Her life's work in curating conversations of depth was born from her refusal to be hurried, and yet, not everyone honors that kind of stillness. Take, for example, Jordan Belfort, the infamous Wolf of Wall Street, driven by impulse, greed, and non-stop noise. He built an empire on urgency, calling clients, closing deals, feeding appetites. But that urgency came at a cost. His life spiraled into chaos, addiction, collapse, prison. In his own words, he admitted that the empire he built was so loud, he couldn't even hear his own collapse coming. That is what happens when scattered energy masquerades as success. Your clarity today, it's not luck. It's not personality. It's a harvest. You sowed it in silence. You watered it in stillness. And now, it returns to you, not in applause, but in peace. The moon's influence hasn't left you. Sagittarius still burns in the sky. But this time, you're not overwhelmed by it. You're aligned with it. Earlier in the day, that fiery, truth-seeking energy might have latched onto the loudest voice in the room or the most emotionally charged conversation in your space. But because you held your ground, you're now able to channel that same Sagittarian expansion with focus, precision, and clarity. You're no longer reacting. You're receiving. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. Ecclesiastes 3:1. This is your time not to respond, but to perceive, to interpret, to finally see what the noise was blocking. As the evening settles in, something unspoken shifts in your spirit. You notice your thoughts stretching further, but not chaotically. They're organized, like stars realigning in constellations, forming meaning where there was once only mystery. The mind that was crowded this morning now feels open. The choice you kept postponing suddenly seems clear. The confusion that spun all week like a fog begins to thin, revealing outlines you couldn't see before. And you're not forcing this breakthrough. You're not pushing. These revelations are not the result of mental gymnastics. They are byproducts of your stillness, of your obedience, of your refusal to scatter when the world begged for your distraction. Call me and I will answer you, and will tell you great and hidden things that you have not known. Jeremiah 33:3. The hidden things were never out of reach. They were just hidden behind the wrong conversations. You may wonder, was the decision always this obvious? Was the solution always this close? Or is it that you're just now still enough to notice? There is a difference between chasing truth and becoming still enough to let truth find you. This moment is evidence. Clarity doesn't come from control. It flows from consecration. Think of the chameleon, not in its camouflage, but in its vision. It can move its eyes independently, scanning different directions without distortion. It doesn't panic. It observes, and when the timing is right, it strikes not reactively, but decisively. That is your posture now. You're no longer caught in emotional crossfire. You're positioned like the chameleon, still, perceptive, undivided. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. James 1:5. And today, wisdom is not being delayed. It's arriving right on time. Now that your gates are clear, this is your reward for choosing clarity over connection, for choosing presence over pleasing, for choosing to remain at your post when every emotional storm tried to pull you into its center. And this reward isn't loud. It won't arrive with fireworks. It won't make headlines. It shows up like a subtle alignment inside your chest, the way a key fits a lock after years of jiggling. And suddenly, what felt stuck turns, opens, releases. You're not waiting anymore. You're seeing, in the acclaimed French spiritual film Of Gods and Men, Des Hommes et des Dieux, 2011. A monk facing persecution in silence remarks, "The world speaks loudly, but truth it often enters through silence and walks with a whisper. That whisper is here now. It's not asking for your analysis. It's inviting your agreement. Can you sit in this clarity without rushing to share it? Can you stay in your center even when people expect you to explain it? The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their cry." Psalm 34:5. God doesn't miss a moment of your quiet obedience. He honors every breath you didn't waste, every word you didn't throw away, every moment you chose not to perform. And now, you're here, in your own mind, in your own atmosphere, undisturbed, unleashed, unavailable to the noise, God's chosen ones. When you guard your channel, you reclaim your hearing. When you honor stillness, you enter revelation. You don't need another voice to confirm what God is already showing you. You don't need to gather opinions to validate your knowledge. This is the reward of your silence. The veil lifts, the path sharpens. The next step is no longer blurred, it's lit from within. Stay clear, stay unshaken, and let the truth arrive not as an argument, but as your alignment. There's a moment so brief, so subtle that it could easily be missed by someone rushing through the noise of life. But if you've trained your spirit to listen, you'll know exactly when it arrives. The signal. It's not a trumpet or a flashing light. It's the quiet release your nervous system makes when you've chosen alignment over appeasement. It's the involuntary lowering of your shoulders, the soft unlocking of your jaw, the breath that deepens without permission. It's your entire inner circuitry reporting, in silence, that you are safe, not because the world became kinder, but because you became firmer. This safety isn't physical, it's electromagnetic. You've remained untangled from emotional frequency warfare. You haven't been hijacked by someone else's chaos. You've refused to be baited by urgency disguised as importance. You've kept your field clean. Psalm 46:10 whispers it best. Be still and know that I am God. Not be productive, not be responsive. Just be still. In that stillness, divine architecture is laid. Think of it like resonance in physics. Two structures cannot maintain their form if their vibrational frequencies are incompatible. When you silence your field, you create a stable temple that heaven can build on. What if your body was never reacting to danger, but recalibrating to clarity? What if those subtle physiological shifts were not relief from threat, but recognition of order? This kind of discernment is not luck, it's discipline. The kind of discipline Olympic athletes use in the milliseconds between movement and reaction. Sports psychologists call it quiet eye, a phenomenon where elite performers, especially in high-speed sports, enter a zone of near stillness to optimize precision. That's exactly what happens in your spirit when you resist the world's pull. Heaven doesn't work with panic. It builds with peace. As Jesus withdrew to the mountains to pray alone, Luke 5:16, not because he feared people, but because alignment requires solitude. You've done the same today. And that spiritual withdrawal isn't just for rest. It's a recalibration, an internal audit, a repositioning of your soul's compass. And as the hours pass and night deepens, something begins to glow, not outside of you, but within. At first it's almost imperceptible. A thought that feels cleaner, a heart that feels quieter. But slowly, steadily, you realize the light was never sent from heaven to hit your face. It was lit in your chest to guide your steps. You didn't just survive the storm, you declined the invitation to enter it. British artist and trauma educator Charlotte Fox once said, "You don't always have to speak your boundaries. Sometimes they're built into your breath." Fox, a survivor of war and grief, learned that inner silence is not the absence of trauma, but the mastery of it. Your boundary today was not your voice, it was your breath. Isn't it astonishing how one day of holy silence can rewire your trust in yourself? How much potential have we lost in the past, simply because we confused presence with permission? The answer isn't to speak louder. The answer is to become so rooted in your alignment that noise can't shake it. Proverbs 17:27 reminds us, "The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered." You've restrained yourself. You've withheld. You've mastered the gate. And now, what comes to you next? Opportunity. Revelation. Restoration will not be contaminated by confusion. It will be pure, because you've made space for it to land. And tomorrow, you'll walk into it differently. Calmer. Sharper. Quieter, but louder in your impact. You'll no longer need to debate whether stillness is a strategy. You'll know it. You'll wear it. You'll lead from it. This Sunday wasn't about escaping people out of fear or withdrawing into isolation. It was about something far more sacred, preserving your clarity during a rare spiritual alignment. Moments like this, where cosmic timing converges with divine purpose, are not meant to be diluted by trivial words or surface-level exchanges. In the same way the priest entered the Holy of Holies with reverence and silence, You too were called to step into a chamber of inner stillness, undisturbed by the distractions that normally flood your day. There's a discipline behind that silence, and it has nothing to do with avoidance. Rather, it's a declaration of divine readiness. You weren't hiding from the world, you were preparing yourself to engage with it differently, just as Jesus often withdrew from the crowds to pray alone, Luke 5:16. You chose not to react to every message, every vibration, every emotional tug, and in doing so, you didn't just guard your energy, you reinforced the path God has been drawing for you in quiet detail. Now that the sun has set and the world begins to exhale, you can feel it, can't you? That soft shift within your spirit. It's subtle, like the change in air pressure before rain, a tangible, unspoken knowing. You didn't scatter your attention across 20 conversations. You didn't offer your voice to noise. You didn't interrupt the sacred download that was meant for your ears only. The result? You're not just more peaceful, you're more aligned. And that alignment is not just a feeling, it is a frequency shift, a recalibration of your inner compass. Now sync to something eternal. Why does it seem like people are suddenly paying more attention to your presence without you saying a word? Why are doors beginning to open without you knocking? Because silence, when chosen intentionally, sends a signal into the unseen realm. You've made room, and now that room is magnetic to the things that once bypassed you when your spirit was crowded. Even now, you may feel the residue of that power. It lingers, like incense after the flame goes out. And what few realize is this: the power you built today does not dissipate with sleep. It echoes. The emotional restraint you practiced, the boundaries you honored, the conversations you didn't have, those weren't small acts. They were spiritual blueprints for how you will handle the next set of opportunities that God is preparing to deliver. The Bible tells us in Ecclesiastes 3-7, there is a time to keep silence and a time to speak. Today was the former, and because you honored it, you will be given supernatural clarity when the time to speak arrives. But here's something many overlook. The quiet doesn't just preserve your energy, it amplifies your discernment. In the days following a Sagittarius moon, truth begins to unravel like a scroll. Motives that were once wrapped in charm reveal their true intention. Plans that were once concealed come into the light. Even your own unresolved emotions, those buried under layers of reaction, start to rise gently, as if summoned by heaven itself. Why is it that you now instinctively know what you couldn't put into words last week? Why is it that a certain conversation now feels unnecessary when just days ago you felt desperate for closure? Because clarity requires space. And space was exactly what you gave it. Just as Samuel heard the whisper of God in the night, 1 Samuel 3:10. Your spirit is beginning to pick up signals that others miss simply because you dared to mute the world for a moment. This is the hidden power of sacred silence. It doesn't scream for answers, it receives them in stillness. Now, to solidify this message, let's revisit a moment from modern life. Brené Brown, a research professor and best-selling author known for her work on vulnerability, once shared, "Stillness is not about focusing on nothingness, it's about creating space to focus on the things that really matter." Her journey, marked by academic success and personal self-exploration, highlights how even in a hyperverbal society, intentional silence births sharper discernment. And that's exactly what you're now tasting. But not everyone chose this path today. You are creating room for revelation. The real test was never about whether you could stay quiet for a few hours. The real test begins now, after the stillness, after the sacred hush of Sunday fades, and life begins to speak again. Will you carry the wisdom or drop it like a garment no longer convenient? You've demonstrated the discipline to protect your energy in a world that constantly demands your attention. But what happens when the noise resumes? What happens when people start calling again? Obligations stack up, and subtle temptations whisper in your ear to abandon what you've gained for the comfort of old rhythms. What if your silence wasn't just rest, but training? The next 48 hours are the proving ground. They will arrive without trumpet blasts, but they will arrive with unmistakable order. You'll notice life leaning toward you, not dramatically, but intentionally. A situation you thought you had to chase will suddenly walk toward you. A door that was closed will creak open with quiet ease. As C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Isn't it funny how day by day nothing changes? But when you look back, everything is different." That's how divine alignment works. It moves in whispers, not earthquakes. And yet, when you pause long enough to feel it, the shift is undeniable, just like how a river slowly reshapes stone, not with force, but with steady precision. Your decision to stay in alignment has carved new space into the architecture of your life. You might even feel it in your body, the way your shoulders settle differently now, the way your breath moves deeper into your chest. These are not coincidences. They are confirmations. Pay attention to the subtleties. For example, a conversation that would normally drain you gets cancelled without your intervention. Or that one task you kept delaying, it suddenly feels easy, as if the resistance that wrapped around it like thorns has dissolved overnight. That's not just convenient. That's the frequency shift. This is what happens when you don't scatter your spiritual seeds in barren soil. As Isaiah 30:15 reminds us, "In quietness and trust is your strength." And now that you've chosen stillness, strength is beginning to rise, not with noise, but with direction. But be warned, the enemy of new alignment is not always chaos. Sometimes it's repetition. Watch for the urge to return to familiar busyness as a form of emotional escape. Don't mistake motion for momentum. Think of the owl, a creature that hunts best not when it flaps its wings, but when it glides in calculated silence. Nature knows that precision always outperforms panic. Can you adopt that kind of wisdom as you move forward? In the 2010 French Christian film Of Gods and Men, the monks of Tiverine knew that staying in alignment with heaven meant choosing peace even when surrounded by pressure. One of the most haunting lines in the film is this: "We are like birds perched on a fragile branch, yet we choose not to fly away." The alignment didn't remove their reality, it strengthened their resolve to remain anchored in purpose. That's the invitation now. You're perched on a moment of stillness, but the winds of the coming days will try to make you flap out of fear. Will you? You may feel like nothing is happening outwardly, but the real transformation is internal. You are no longer reacting, you are responding. And that response is built on alignment, not urgency. You'll begin to notice things before they're said. A person enters the room, and you sense their intention before they speak. That's not paranoia, that's spiritual perception, sharpening. Silence has cleared the static, and now you can hear the subtleties again. You'll finish tasks faster, not because you're rushing, but because your energy is consolidated. You'll say less, but every word will carry more meaning. You'll pause before responding, and in that pause, heaven speaks. Isn't it interesting how the winds die down just before a revelation arrives? Not a storm, but a whisper that rearranges your direction. Romains 12:2 Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That renewal isn't loud, it's deliberate. And the silence you chose on Sunday was the start of it. So now, in these next few days. Stay aware. The signs will come gently, but they will be unmistakable. Watch how your name is mentioned in the right room without your presence. Watch how your path clears, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped forcing. This is what spiritual maturity looks like, when you realize the greatest power is not in what you chase, but in what you attract by staying true to your divine center. None of this is random. It is the product of internal architecture that has finally stabilized. When a building's foundation is poured with mathematical precision and cured without interruption, it can bear the weight others collapse under. Your silence on Sunday wasn't passivity, it was structural alignment. You cleared the static from your frequency. And now, reality is beginning to phase lock with your true resonance. In physics, when two oscillating bodies adjust to a shared frequency, they amplify each other's energy. That's what's happening now. By wisdom, a house is built, and through understanding it is established. Through knowledge, its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. Proverbs 24:3-4. This verse isn't just poetic, it's a blueprint. Your stillness allowed divine understanding to reframe the rooms of your soul. How would your life shift if your boundaries were as intentional as a blueprint? You may find that truth begins to seep into spaces you once avoided, examining, like ambient light exposing fingerprints on glass. Subtle distortions in people's behavior are easier to spot. A seemingly polite smile begins to feel like a performance. A repeated pattern of emotional labor in a relationship now reveals its hidden invoice. An ambition you once held tightly might suddenly feel like someone else's blueprint imposed on your spirit. But this is not the time to tear down walls or renovate the entire house. No. The point of Sunday's alignment was never to build fortresses. It was to recalibrate your internal acoustics. You are the cathedral now, and every voice that echoes inside you must serve the purpose of sacred resonance. The first conversation you have after this silence will set a psychological precedent. In music theory, it's called the tonal center. Once it's struck, the rest of the melody follows. What emotional key will you allow to define your week? What if your first words weren't just sounds, but coordinates positioning your entire week in or out of divine alignment? But I tell you that everyone will have to give account on the day of judgment for every empty word they have spoken. Matthew 12:36. This wasn't just a warning, it was a revelation of how spiritually potent words can be. His silence carried such weight that the Israelites were afraid to approach him. When Aaron and all the Israelites saw Moses, his face was radiant, and they were afraid to come near him. Exodus 3:4-3. Sacred silence reshapes the presence you carry. Have you ever wondered how many of your conversations are echoes, not of your voice, but of someone else's emotional chaos? So when you feel the impulse this week to respond from habit, stop, breathe, identify the old program, and release it like expired code from your system. The Sagittarius fire you felt during the alignment has not faded. It's become more refined, like heat funneled through a laser. And now, that light is meant for action, but not chaotic. Anxious movement, strategic action, born from centeredness. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus 5:13. Stillness was not your inactivity. It was your surrender to divine precision. In this quiet focus, you might notice an old emotion surface. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's the need to explain your peace to those who don't understand it. Let it come, but don't let it settle. As Paul wrote in Galatians 1:10, "Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? If I was still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ." You weren't made to be understood in every season. You were made to be aligned in the right one. Finally, do not dismiss the small signs. The whisper is God's preferred delivery system, just like in 1 Kings 19:12. When Elijah did not hear God in the wind, earthquake, or fire, but in the gentle whisper. The echo of that whisper is what will guide you in the coming days. What if the voice you've been waiting for is already speaking, but you've been too loud to hear it? You're not resisting connection. You're refusing confusion. The people meant to walk with you will meet you at this clearer pace. The ones who only find you in chaos will think you've changed, and they're right. But that change isn't rejection, it's refinement. You've elevated. And if doubt ever creeps in, was the silence really necessary? Just notice what happens when you give yourself even one uninterrupted hour. The same calm you touched last night reappears without effort. That's not random. That's your spirit recognizing resonance. It's what the prophet Isaiah captured in Isaiah 30:15. In quietness and trust is your strength. What if your peace was never meant to be loud, but deeply rooted? This is your upgrade, a sacred recalibration of your internal world. And it matters because words are not just tools, they are frequencies. Every sentence carries a vibration. Some strengthen your spirit, others drain it. When we speak out of habit, rambling, explaining, oversharing, we perforate our own atmosphere. But when we speak with intention, few words become strong ones. Proverbs 18:21 warns clearly. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Have you ever noticed how one sentence can make or break your whole day? That's not magic, it's spiritual architecture. Just as David calmed Saul with a harp before he ever held a sword, your ability to hold peace in your voice can quiet entire rooms. In moments where you're tempted to over-explain, remember the example of Jesus in Mark 1:35. Very early in the morning, he went off to a solitary place, where he prayed. The Son of God himself withdrew from the noise before he moved with power. If silence was part of his divine rhythm, shouldn't it be part of yours? The power of this practice can be seen in the life of Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, one of the pioneers of analytical psychology. Others may feel like sand slipping through your fingers, and that's okay. Judas didn't betray Jesus from across the room, he kissed him. Luke 22:48 recounts this moment. Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? The ones closest to you know where the tender buttons are. Not all mean harm, but some know exactly how to cloak manipulation in the language of concern. Can you tell the difference? To understand how failing to guard your atmosphere can lead to downfall, look no further than the tragic unraveling of Elizabeth Holmes, the once celebrated founder of Theranos. She spoke with clarity, with certainty, with calm confidence, but her words were not aligned with truth. She allowed the illusion of innovation to replace integrity. Eventually, silence came, but not by her choice. It came through consequence. But can you carry that precision into the chaos of Monday? Can you enter a fast-moving conversation and still speak slowly, clearly, truthfully? Ecclesiastes 3:7 reminds us, there's a time to keep silence and a time to speak. Which season are you in today? This is where spiritual maturity reveals itself. When the noise returns, when the world asks you to reply quickly, to fill silence with words, to explain your peace, what will you do? Will you protect the sacred stillness you've built, or let anxiety bulldoze it with a single rushed sentence? You don't need to perform wisdom. You don't need long paragraphs to justify your decisions. Sometimes, one honest sentence carries more impact than 1,000 empty ones. And as Psalm 46:10 so clearly says, "Be still and know that I am God." Their words arrive like cluttered frequencies, worry broadcasts, complaint loops, subtle jabs dressed as jokes, not unlike the way fog rolls into a valley without warning, dulling every contour of clarity. These conversations begin soft and end heavy. If you absorb those frequencies unconsciously, you begin to carry them as your own. And by noon, you're wondering why you're exhausted. Boundaries, then, are not acts of rebellion. They are forms of ecological preservation, like how the Arctic fox curls into a perfect circle to conserve heat in harsh weather. It's not rejection, it's intelligence. Even Jesus himself would often withdraw to lonely places and pray, Luke 5:16, not because he was avoiding people, but because even the Son of God knew that clarity requires distance from the crowd. You wouldn't let someone plug 20 devices into one outlet and then blame the outlet for burning out. And the less you scatter your presence, the more your life consolidates around what truly matters. As Proverbs 17:27 reminds us, the one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered. Sometimes the holiest thing you can do is say less and stay centered. That's why Sunday was never about retreating out of fear. It was about alignment. With the moon transiting through truth-seeking Sagittarius, language doesn't float, it lands like arrows. On days like this, every phrase is inked more deeply into your spiritual ledger. Every sentence becomes a covenant. Every affirmation, a declaration of atmosphere. This is why we kept you quiet, not to withhold power, but to prevent unintentional spell casting. Yes, spell casting. Words become behavior. Behavior builds patterns. Patterns define destiny. You're either casting the path God designed, or you're echoing scripts that were never yours to speak. You tuned yourself. The yoke shall be destroyed because of the anointing. And anointing always rides on a purified frequency. In the film of Gods and Men, a French Christian drama based on true events, one monk whispers to another, "I am not afraid of death. I am afraid of speaking when I should be silent." That line carries a weight we rarely acknowledge. Sometimes, it's not what you say, but when and from what frequency you say it. Do you truly believe your words create rooms or remove roofs? Can you tell when your voice opens heavens versus when it empties you? Energy thieves rarely come in wolf's clothing. Most arrive in familiar rhythms, small talk, flattery, venting disguised as intimacy. But access is the real currency. And access comes through attention and speech. Guard both with care. Give your attention to things that feed your future. Give your speech only to what you're willing to build. But if it diverts or drains, carry Sunday into your weekdays. Let silence be the soft knock that honors what you're becoming. You're not avoiding life. You're owning your broadcast. You're stepping into the room with language that doesn't leak. It unlocks. And when next Sunday comes, you won't arrive desperate for peace. You'll arrive as one who's mastered the cycle, one who returns not for rescue, but for recalibration. You'll sit in that sacred stillness and hear, once again, the note that makes everything else make sense. Let this not be a fleeting exception, but a sacred beginning. The decisions ahead will feel cleaner. Your words will land heavier, not because they're louder, but because they are rooted, not in reactivity, but in resonance. The next time the week accelerates, your nervous system won't chase it. It will guide it. The shift you made today wasn't just personal, it was architectural. You laid a new foundation. So, As the next conversations arise, you'll find yourself walking away more easily from what exhausts you and drawing nearer to what restores you. You'll recognize false urgency and call it by name, and when the next divine alignment comes, you'll meet it not with confusion, but clarity, not with hesitation, but quiet readiness. And most of all, you'll remember this: you didn't just stay silent, you took your power back.